I'm Em Sutter, better known as Pints and Panels.
And I'm Don Tess, better known as the Dawn of Beer.
Welcome to episode 82 of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. This week on the show, we are going to talk about Japanese rice lager, and we're going to be talking all about rice. But first, visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And visit allaboutbeer.com/to support this show and others. Don, I feel like you'll have some thoughts about Japanese rice lager and rice, and if so, what are they?
Um, I think that there's this perception that rice is used as a adjunct by macro brewers just to make beer cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
But as I think we've probably both seen in the craft brewing space, Japanese rice lager seems to be kind of a growing style, and that, you know, rice has flavor. It might be subtle, but it's not nothing. And I think that it can be fun to lean into that. How about you?
I mean, Japanese rice lagers are delicious, crisp, all that stuff. And I think a lot of people see adjuncts still as this kind of filler. And we did an episode about corn,
Hmm.
and now we're doing an episode about rice, and nothing of the sort. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk to two really amazing guests about like brewing a unique Japanese rice lager and then talking with someone who's like the most passionate person ever about rice and what rice can bring to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Spoiler alert, we get nerdy.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna love it. But first, if you would like to help support the All About Beer podcast, reach out to podcast at allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of supporting the show, here is a word from our sponsors.
This program is brought to you by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, where trailblazing runs in the family. From crafting a movement with their iconic pale ale to taking the IPA haze craze nationwide with Hazy Little Thing, it's an adventurous spirit you can taste in every sip. Find your next favorite beer wherever fine beverages are sold. With new brews for every season, there's always something to discover. Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. Still family owned, operated, and argued over.
Sean Buchan is the co-owner and CEO of Cerebral Brewing, a nationally recognized Denver brewery known for its scientific approach to craft beer and award-winning portfolio, now with three locations across the Denver metro area. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. First off, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about how popular this style is right now. Like it is everywhere. It feels like it's everywhere. I don't know what the Denver Japanese rice lager scene is. Maybe it's only here in New England or whatnot, or in the Northeast. I mean, this style is really having a moment, at least in my knowledge. Like, why do you think that Japanese ri rice lager is so popular?
Yeah, I don't know if it's having a moment here, but I think lager in general is having a moment in Denver,
Yes.
and then by proxy, rice lager is definitely getting a lot of attention. Um, I think it just kind of it does what a lot of consumers want. It gives them a nice, drinkable, dry, but still flavorful lager experience that just kind of like it's a good one that just leaves you wanting that next sip. It doesn't fill you up too much. It's again light, nice, dry, but rice offers a little bit of sweetness, so it keeps you coming back.
I like that. Um, so when did you start brewing it? And were you trying to jump onto that trend, or do you feel you maybe helped start that trend? Or
I definitely don't think we started any trends.
okay.
To be humble about it, I think we also didn't do it to jump on one either. We started making lager in about early 2019. So we opened in 2015, and there were so many great lager, and still are so many great lager breweries in Denver that honestly we were a little bit intimidated to start producing things at that scale with Bierstadt down the street and other producers that have been doing this for decades. Um,
Mm.
and when we started making lager, we set out to just kind of do something a little bit different. And I just been out to Copenhagen for a beer festival, and I tried some beers from Threes. and they fermented theirs in oak foeders. And I was really, really like in love with that concept. I love the beers. Tired Hands had some similar concepts, although on the mixed culture side. So we knew we wanted to do something like this. When we got back, we bought some American oak foeders, and we started with Hellas production and an international style Pilsner that we were making at the time. And the rice lager was kind of next up, and that was almost exclusively born out of having Freem's rice lager and loving it and just wanting to produce something, our own take on that and something similar to that on our own.
Do
Okay.
you, how many lagers do you put in a foeder?
So it's all of our lager production except for two brands at the moment. So we have an American light lager, Neon Light is all stainless, and then we have a Kolsch that we do Rain Shadow that is also stainless. So, we'll do probably 2 dozen lagers in a year. With maybe a little bit of variation on style there. We'll do a lot of just new hoppy lagers and then kind of bring back like rice lager, for example. We have Paper Lantern, the base version. Then we also do a variation with lime and a variation with yuzu throughout the year.
How much, like, how many foeders is that? Like, what's the size of each of the, I mean, we're not,
Yeah.
this is not I'm getting a little off topic here, but I've never heard of a brewery that's like, we're going all in on foeder lager before.
Yeah, we only have two that we use for lagering. So we've got a few others for mixed culture at our original location, but at our production facility, we've got a 30 barrel and a 20 barrel. Those are a little bit different in terms of capacity than I think people typically talk about tanks, because typically in like a 30 or a 20 barrel fermenter, you would have about 20% headspace on top of that.
Hmm.
These numbers don't have any headspace. That is like 30 barrels to the top and you are overflowing.
So, I guess I think a lot of people, myself included, lager should be clean, and and I think we think of fodder as being where you would do mixed culture. So why do you do lagers in fodder? And then just kind of um, um, grabbing onto something you just said, like, is there a reason why you want them super full?
Yeah, I guess the reason that we want them super full, we don't usually like fill them to the point of overflowing. We just need to fill them to a certain point because, and the reason we're able to do lagering in them is we have chill plates in them. So a normal fermenter, you would have a glycol jacket surrounding the tank that is chilling the beer. We
Hmm.
don't have a jacket around this tank. It's inserted into it like a fin that goes down. So we just have to hit a certain level on that fin. Otherwise, it's the cooling efficiency is low enough that we're probably not going to be able to maintain lagering temps.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, we going back to like just why it was honestly we just worked it backwards. We had the beer that was conditioned in foeders, and a lot of people will do it reverse to us, and they will um, ferment in stainless and then condition in oak, but we kind of like the results that we get the other way around. And we find that it just softens the beer. These are like, at this point, the foeders are going on 6 years old. So
Hmm.
there's no character, there's no oak character being displayed. There's never been any mixed culture elements, so you're not getting any funk like you would typically get in something coming out of Belgium that's going to be conditioned in a foeder, or like American wild ale. So we just find that there's a little bit of micro oxidation that rounds the beer. We've done a few beers that have been stainless first and then oak, and we've preferred the oak fermented version. And then it really also comes down to the tank geometry. With with yeast, you worry a lot about hydrostatic pressure with a clean fermentation. And what we're able to do is it's especially our 30 barrel foeder, it's not quite 1 to 1. It's a little taller than it is wide, but it's a very wide tank. And it's similar to a bright tank where you have a flat bottom. So there isn't like a cone and a pinch point where you have a lot of hydrostatic pressure on your yeast. So we're able to get a really nice, clean, beautiful expression from our yeast strains in there. And that's, another reason we really just love using them.
And are they open top?
They are not open top.
Okay. Just because
All
you
right.
mentioned micro oxidation, so I thought
Yeah.
maybe. But
Yeah,
anyways.
no, it's more that you just it's like conditioning any beer in an oak barrel. There's always going to be oxygen ingress between the staves. Depends on,
Yes.
the level. Like these are American oaks, so they're much tighter. So we don't get a lot of that, and we make sure to swell them and treat them between uses. So we do everything we can to limit it, but there is definitely some level of that compared to stainless, which is sealed.
Right. Thank you.
So
Yeah.
back to our regularly scheduled program about Japanese rice lager.
Yes.
I mean, a foeder episode. We should write that down, Don. So
We're here
how,
for it.
yeah, so for Paper Lantern, which is your Japanese rice lager, how did you guys approach this recipe? Were you thinking about Japanese brands or just like what you wanted to drink? Or is this something new? I always think about like French Pilsner. We did an episode of that, which is a totally wholly American invention.
Yeah.
Nothing like they're doing in France. So, like, how did you approach this?
We definitely approached it based on the beers that we were getting here in the States. So I mentioned Freem as the premium example there, but
Hmm.
there were other ones we were drinking at the time that we were really impressed by. But how we kind of approach everything and how I'll typically approach something is, you know, I like being the dumbest guy in the room. I like asking a lot of questions. So I just sat down with one of those beers and at the time, talking to our head brewer, figure out like what did we want out of this beer, and then I just reached out and I emailed Freem, and their head brewer at the time got back to me with some tips, and we took that, ran with our first batch, made some tweaks over the next few batches, and I feel like got into a pretty good spot, probably two or three batches in, something that we were really happy with.
Can I just say that the beer industry is just, I want to brew what you
Oh.
brew, and they're like, yeah, I got you. Like
Yeah,
that's so
yeah.
I don't know another industry where someone would be like, "Oh yeah, no problem. Here's some tips and tricks." Like most people would be like, "Get the fuck away from me." Like I'm not going to give you any secrets. Like I just think that's
No,
I'm
you're right. It's totally unlike anything I've been a part of. I was in healthcare before this, which, is, I guess, fairly collaborative. So I did have the luck of being in two of these industries, but I think there's nothing really like
Wait,
beer in that regard.
healthcare is collaborative? I mean, I'm not
Uh,
seeing a lot of pharma
it
companies sharing their patents, but
I did not
anyways.
work in pharmacy. I did not
Okay.
work in, I was a physical therapist. So I'd say in
Oh,
terms
okay.
of our treatment approaches, that, all about helping the patient. But yeah, you start to get to that level of healthcare and it's not.
Can I nerd out and ask you like how, obviously it's still well, I shouldn't say obviously. I assume it's still a barley-based beer. How much rice
Mhm.
is used? And, I'm just thinking when you get to a certain percentage, does this create problems for you with diastatic power or stuck mashes or anything like that?
Yeah, so we use two different types of rice. And then like in total, we're looking just a little bit shy of 25%. So we're probably around 24% rice.
Okay.
And that's split between the majority of it being like a flaked rice that we get, that's pre-gelatinized, so we don't have to worry about cereal mashes or anything like that. And then we use one of the tricks that I got from Freem was the using rice syrup solids. So that's
Oh,
just essentially already conditioned and made into a nice, easy to use sugar that we can add, and um, not really have to worry about stuck mashes. We don't have to worry about fan content at that level. Um, yeah.
yeah. Sorry, just to go back to 101, because neither M nor I are brewers. What is
Yeah.
gelatinization? What does that mean?
So this is kind of like pre-cooking it for us. So they're just conditioning it so that we can get access to all of the starch and sugar in the rice.
I see. Um, and does it matter the rice variety, like jasmine versus, I don't know, long grain, or I don't know very many different rice varieties.
It definitely does, and we don't use individual varieties. Like when we get the pre-gelatinized like flaked rice that we get, um, is not, we're not getting like the individual variety on the bag, but I do know
Oh,
brewers that use like sushi grade rice or jasmine rice, and they're seeing like great results with that. Frankly, on our scale, it just gets to be difficult, and our brew house is not set up for that, so we don't
I see.
go that route.
And then what about the other raw materials like hopping? I mean, I don't
Mhm.
it's pretty low, what I assume, but maybe yours isn't?
Yeah, we don't target, like the bitterness is pretty low in comparison to some of the other lagers that we do. So when I talk about IBUs too, just a disclaimer that like we don't test these. So
Hmm.
on a lot of brands, especially this one, we've tested our system on what to expect. So it's a little theoretical. But we really target around like 20 to 22 IBUs for this. And it's all coming from Saaz or Supersaucer, the American
Mm.
variety. So it's a lot of that Supersaucer in the boil to keep, hop load down in terms of vegetal mass. So yield is high. And then we're using Saaz in the whirlpool.
And then like yeast and how long from like start to finish is this beer gonna take?
Yeah, so we for a lot of our lagers that aren't going to require like a secondary strain or using something different, we use dry yeast, so we use 3470. And that one does a really, really nice job for us. Low sulfur, so we don't have to worry about too much of that. And we're looking at we knock out at 50 and we're fermenting between 48 and 50. We'll bring it up for a D-rest and then uh, what we also try to do is if we can time fermentation in the foeder, um, and make sure that we've got a bright tank ready so that when that beer is done fermenting in that like 10 to 11 day window, then we're moving it over to the bright tank and then it's conditioning there for as long as we can give it, typically 5, 6 weeks.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your tasting notes on your website about this beer, because it says
Yeah.
like ice chamomile tea, junmai sake, melon mochi, Hokkaido summertime.
Ooh,
These are, I know, right?
Hokkaido summertime.
I know. So like how are you using verbiage to kind of change the narrative on what Japanese rice lagers can be and what customers should expect?
Yeah, I think in general with our tasting notes, we try to have fun with those. So, like, it's not a rule, but we'll try to have a few that are more like just approachable, and then one something that's like maybe wants to like it causes you to look that up. Like here's a random fruit one of our staff encountered that we think fits here, and trying to just like draw people in a little bit. So, like, oh yeah, I
Hmm.
know what those first two are, but I have no idea what that third thing is.
Mm.
And then I'd also say Anne, our ops director grew up and like spent her high school years and some other years in Japan. So I think she's got a lot that she drew on for that in writing those tasting notes for us. But what we try to do there is really like bring the customer in on any style and say like you might not know what this beer style is, and that's fine. Like here's
Hmm.
what to expect. Here's the flavor journey that you're going to experience.
Great.
Cool. Kind of related to that, then, I think there are some people who think, oh, lagers, lagers, lager. Lager is kind of a catch-all generic term for any kind of light beer. So, what do you wish people understood specifically and appreciate more? I think more importantly, what do you think people appreciated specifically about Japanese rice lager? What should people look for?
I just love how delicate it is. Like it's just we finish like pretty dry on these, so it's like 1.5 Play-Doh, not a lot of sugar left, and what would in many other styles maybe be very dry and borderline astringent, like the rice just brings out this subtle sweetness that you can I don't know, taste in a lot of different ways that just rounds the beer out and makes it so much more drinkable than it would otherwise be if it were adapted to be any other style. And I don't know, I think it's overall drinkability, especially in the summertime in Denver, when it's 95, 100 degrees, I can't think of a style that's more fitting, um, and just overall drinkability.
Yeah, or summertime in Hokkaido, as the case may be.
Exactly. I've never been though.
Neither have I.
Neither have I. Sean, thank you so much for talking about your Japanese rice lager today. If people want to learn more about this style or Cerebral, how can they reach out? Website, social media handles?
Yeah, Cerebral Brewing on all the social media handles, our website, cerebralbrewing.com, and then info@cerebralbrewing.com is a good email address.
Awesome. Thank you so much for teaching us about your like that. I loved the deviation of into the foeder lagering. I have so many more questions. You'll have to come
Yeah.
back when we do another episode about this.
Sounds
That's
good.
really, really cool. Cheers. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you so much.
All right. And we'll be right back with food scientist Scott LaFontaine after these messages from our sponsor.
This program is brought to you by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, where trailblazing runs in the family. From crafting a movement with their iconic pale ale to taking the IPA haze craze nationwide with Hazy Little Thing, it's an adventurous spirit you can taste in every sip. Find your next favorite beer wherever fine beverages are sold. With new brews for every season, there's always something to discover. Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, still family owned, operated, and argued over.
Scott LaFontaine is an assistant professor at the University of Arkansas. Generally, his research interests include understanding the important chemical drivers of aroma, taste, and mouthfeel, which define food and beverage quality, and how different factors, i.e., raw material quality, production methods, etc., influence these analysis in value-added products like beer, wine, non-alcoholic, sake, etc. A particular focus at the University of Arkansas is the establishment of a group that is focused on promoting training and research initiatives in beverage development, which will help to establish qualified and diverse professionals as well as the novel products of the future. Welcome to the show, Scott.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So a lot of people, when they think of rice, especially in terms of like beer production, people don't think rice has actual flavor. But it it must, or in my head it does. Can you let us know about like what rice would add to beer or just like flavors in general people should be looking for, if anything, or am I wrong?
I think it's like quite complex in the sense that I think a historical perspective first is where we should maybe start on this topic. And so when you look at like why rice was used and how rice has been used in the brewing industry, it sort of shapes like, what our current perceptions of that ingredient. So, historically, German immigrants came to the US, they started settling down, and then you start to have a thirst for beer that looked like what was in Germany. And in terms of raw ingredients at the time, right, they would have had access to feed barley and not necessarily good quality malting barley. And what that means is that feed barley probably would have been 6 row, would have been higher in protein.
Hmm.
And what Adolphus Busch did was basically look for a way to dilute that protein down. And so we ended up getting to rice. And it's been interesting sort of like creating a university program that's like looking at what to do with rice because, generally when I go out and speak with brewers, it's like rice drives, people are using rice because it is cost effective. And originally, historically speaking, like that rice would have been premium. It would have not
Mm.
been a cost effective ingredient. So fast forward to today, I still think from a barley quality perspective, right? We have poor barley harvests that have, when it gets hotter, barley's going to have higher protein too. So still we have that protein problem we have to solve, and rice can help us with that. But also if we look at brands, like for example, Michelob Ultra, consumers like I think that neutrality, right? Like that volume that brand wouldn't be tripling in volume if the neutrality and the characteristics that rice brought to the table weren't sessionable.
Hmm.
Um, and so those like I think in the traditional sense, rice is going to bring neutrality. It's going to bring a clean, crisp taste profile. Um, but like as we've been getting into our research, it also has to deal like that. The rice and what you're using, like the format of rice, whether or not it's flaked or rice, broken rice or syrup, like those are all going to impact how rice expresses itself. Like brewing
Hmm.
with whole kernel rice is not the same as brewing with flaked rice. The flaking process is gonna bring other characteristics to the party. And depending on how much bran you leave on the material before you flake, you get like more or less oxidation. So just that's, I think, like a pretty good starting place is like, you know, we started with neutrality, and I think there's a lot like, I think you're doing the show about the Japanese loggers, right?
Hmm.
And in that case, like for what like I love about Japanese loggers is this crisp character that they have. And I think rice has a lot to do with that taste profile and delivering that, as well as being sort of neutral.
Hmm. And sorry, do those two things go hand in hand? The crisp, does neutrality give the crispness, or is that just a carbonation thing? Or
Well, I think it's like a pure starch source, sort of, right? Like
oh,
you can
okay,
think about this in the sense that like, provided you can gelatinize that starch and break it apart, um, as you saccharify it with malt enzymes, if you can create a high amount of extract from a starch source, and that starch source doesn't have a lot of characteristic to it, it's similar to like adding sucrose, like in a Belgium style IPA, for example, to boost up ABV. Like originally, like it doesn't necessarily matter where you get that sugar from, provided that sugar does not have actual character trait. And so by driving up ABV with whatever the sugar source is, and in this case, in rice loggers, it's rice and it's neutral rice, we get a clean, crisp finish.
okay. You mentioned quickly, using broken kernels or whole kernels or flaked. I'm not a brewer, so I guess I always just thought flaking, for example, was a way to pre-gelatinize rice, and but you're saying which is a manner of making the sugars available, but you're saying maybe it actually impacts flavor as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. I mean that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
And for folks that don't necessarily know the brewing process, all grains store their energy as starch, and that starch is stored in little molecular structures that we call starch granules. They kind of look like balloons, and what we have to do is basically disintegrate that structure, so that the starch becomes long chains that we can then break that down with enzymes. And rice, typically, in the way that we understand it, has very tight starch granules, whereas barley has a little bit larger size granules. And what that means is I have to put more energy in to break apart the rice starch than I do the barley starch. Now that's just current opinion. In my lab, we're starting to like actually look at different varieties of rice and using rice for brewing purposes, not just getting rice that's that's a secondary byproduct of the edible milling industry.
Okay.
And when we think about that, basically the the temperature at which that starch disintegrates is called the gelatinization temperature. And we find that there are some rice varieties that actually gelatinize kind of close to barley. And
Oh,
what that means
Mm.
from a practical brewing perspective is I don't need somebody to flake that material for me. Instead, I just have to contract a farmer to grow the right variety for me. Similar to would be like, right now, I think a lot of brewers just get rice and think white rice is white rice and all rice is the same, right? Like that's where we're at currently in the industry. But there's
hmm.
so much complexity with the grain. And, I talked a lot about neutrality, but as we look at these different varieties, there's also other subclasses of rice. There's aromatic rice and there's pigmented rice. And those two classes also bring potentiality for product innovation.
Wow.
So to expand on that, like what do you think what type of rice should brewers be using or what type of like rice should they be totally staying away from?
I mean, like this is kind of complex. Like this, to me, that question, like as so again, I got to University of Arkansas, and what brought me to Arkansas was the rice.
Oh, yeah,
So
true.
Arkansas grows 50% of the rice in the US, and I did my PhD at Oregon State, and I always wanted to be in academics, and I wanted to make sure that the brewing industry, like I want to be somebody that helps to bring talent into this industry, right? Strong
Mhm.
talent also breeds a strong industry, and I believe that we have to have these strong programs. But what I saw at Oregon State is that you had to have an agricultural product in your state that was tied to that industry. And so in Oregon, they had hops. And I start to
Mhm.
look at who's the biggest end user of Arkansas rice, and it's Anheuser-Busch. And then it
Ah.
just started to think like, why don't more brewers use rice? Like, what are the challenges? And so that gelatinization piece is one. And when you start to look at it, that flaked material, you start to get characteristics that come from the flaking process that you're associating with that grain, but it's not actually the grain that's driving that flavor profile. So, for example, the more bran that you leave on during the flaking process, that bran has lipids in it. And lipids, basically, if you took your olive oil and just kind of open the cap, um, or your vegetable oil, open the cap, and you leave it out on the counter, it becomes what we call rancid. It sort of becomes fishy. The
Mhm.
same
Mhm.
thing happens on the surface of that flake material. Those lipids start to oxidize, and then we associate it with that grain. But when we start to actually control the amount of lipid on the surface of the grain and we use broken material or kernel rice, that characteristic goes down. Um, so, I mean, well, and this is sort of new research that we did this past year. We basically stored raw material that was freshly made over the past 6 months. And so we're starting to get this insight. But to me, it's been eye-opening. And then just to talk about the other avenues, like um, I like to promote people using local ingredients. So in India, like overall, the rice market right now is 30% import rice. And most of that is Indian basmati and Thai jasmine. Those are aromatic rice varieties, and they're long grain rice. Um, so uh, they would be there's like two subclasses of rice. There's short, medium, and well, like you designate rice by its kernel size, which is short, medium, long, and that's designated by USDA. But these aromatic rice varieties, in their genetics, they start to express this compound 2-acetylpyrroline, and it tastes like popcorn or vanilla or cream.
Hmm.
Now, we in the brewing industry like have problems with some of those flavors, right? Like yeast creates diacetyl, and
Mhm.
that's a butter flavor, which, the only style that should be in is Czech Pilsner, from my perspective. Because, I have to taste defects, and if I like detect that there, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So this aromatic rice has a quality that's adjacent to that. And just like a little bit of an aside, I was just down at the Texas Master Brewers meeting, and we brew a lot with an aromatic variety that we have. So the university is trying to start to breed aromatic varieties to help our local farmers grow domestic aromatic rice. And we have a variety here at the University of Arkansas. It's a Roma 22. And we brew with that a lot. And so we create an IPA that is in our repertoire with 30% inclusion of that rice. And so we brought that to the Texas NBAA, but that trait, that vanilla trait, all the brewers there were perseverating on the fact that it was, diacetyl-like,
Oh.
which influenced, I think, the sessionability of it, right? And so, like from a locale perspective, we had not uh, ran into that all that much. But when you think about it, like if I'm in Texas, it's so friggin' hot, right? Like, and so I need something that is like if I was going to design for consumers there, like, I can't necessarily have those traits that are, people are going to perseverate on. I need to make sure that that thing is crisp and clean. So, like, if I was in Texas, maybe using a neutral rice might be a good thing. But maybe if I'm in a colder climate like Wisconsin, or maybe up in Canada, where maybe that trait could be a little bit like, that vanilla might go a little bit, or be a little bit more acceptable, or maybe it play well in a stout, or porter, for example, or cream ale. I was just on another podcast where that came up. Um, so I don't know. I think it's the right rice, the right format for your particular purpose. And I know that's a little bit long-winded, but there's a lot of complexity in this.
And you're just kind of at the beginning of all the, getting people to think about it differently.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and now as you start to look under the hood, there's all these avenues that you can use this local starch. And one thing that I think drives me in this, and starting to get more into the grain side, like, so I did my PhD on hops. On the grain side, we treat these grains as commodities. But why? Like, there is novelty and, potential value add proposition with using um, rice varieties for purpose.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so another interesting uh, uh, group here in Arkansas that I've started to work with is Bell Farms. And when I first got here, they already had a model where they were growing rice for purpose, and they have been since the 1980s. Chris Isbell, who it's like a fifth generation farm, but he's the third generation right now. Took a gamble in the 80s to bring over a Japanese rice variety called Yamada Nishiki. And fast forward to today, they're one of the premium sake grade growers of rice outside of Japan for that rice variety. And there have been delegations from Japan that have come and visited Arkansas and that farm. But they grow this particular rice variety, and it has a very unique starch characteristic that sake brewers are that it's sought after by sake brewers. And, seeing that was pretty eye-opening to me, because again, like, those sake brewers are seeking out specific varieties of rice for purpose, not just using what's there. Um, and so I think, like, from a craft brewing perspective, there can be a lot of alignment with this type of motivation
Yeah.
and perspective, particularly when in the US we import 70% of our barley.
Hmm.
70% of our starch comes from abroad, So when you look locally, there's enough rice that's grown in the Mississippi Delta to, if every brewer in the US wanted to switch over from rice to barley, we would have the acreage available. I mean,
Mm.
provided
Yeah. Yeah.
farmers would want to move from growing edible rice to brewers rice. But this, to me, like, we've been doing a lot of economics on this because, I'm a scientist. I want to make sure that it makes real world sense to do this. And it does. Like, I mean, at least it pans out to that too.
Yeah. I love that.
And then I just have one more question. So, what do you wish people understood about rice? I can tell you're like super passionate about this, which I'm obsessed. I love it. Like, what do you wish people understood about rice that they just don't?
So, I mean, I think there's a lot, like, when we think about beer quality and how that's going to change over the next 50 years, brewers and consumers, we have a lot of there's a lot of pressures that's going to, like, impact the quality of our beer.
Hmm.
And so access to raw materials is definitely one major feature that we're going to have to adapt to. And when you look out into the future, we have models that predict, like, barley yield. And what we see is that barley quality and yield are going to drop significantly. What's neat about rice is it's a tropical grain, right? It grows around the equator, it germinates around the equator. It has its own problems, right? It's a water hog, it can create methane, but we're starting to figure out, on the farming side, how to kind of reduce those climate impacts of that grain. Now, while we look for grains for the future, right? Like the Land Institute has been doing a really good job of promoting Kernza. Kernza is a perennial a grain, and it yields half of what barley does in the field.
Oh,
For people that don't know what perennial means, is that basically you can plant that and you get subsequent crops year after year. But the thing is that grain and that yield drops every year for the farmer. So for the
oh,
farmer to get an ROI on that, basically by the third year, they have to rip that field out and replant it, or at least that's what I've heard. So when you look at rice from an agronomic perspective, modern rice cultivars yield 3x per field or acre than does barley, 3 times more. And this was eye-opening to me because, like, again, 3 years ago, I know nothing about this space, but it's been like I've gone all in the past 3 years. And what that is, why that's eye-opening is you have this grain that can yield on an acre. So we need half the amount of acreage to grow the same amount of extract. We are finding basically varieties that can provide novel traits, neutral traits, and barley-like traits. So if you want to come over and use rice to like innovate or create that neutral character, there's a lot of ways you can leverage this grain to create a variety of different products, seltzers or crisp, clean Japanese lagers or Indian basmati IPAs, for example. Like the innovation space is just as cool as leveraging any other grain. Um, and so that's like, I think what I'd suggest for folks is just, if you hear something interesting in this, know that there are local ingredients probably around you that could offer this as well. It might not be rice. It may be corn, right? Like it may be wheat. There are a lot of opportunities, and I think just what I'd suggest to folks is we're going to need a lot of tools and tool chest to like make sure that beer tastes the way it does 50 years from now. And rice is definitely a piece of that puzzle.
I like
So
that.
Fascinating.
Food for
That's
thought.
awesome.
No pun
Yeah.
intended. Food for thought. Ha ha ha.
yeah.
Sorry.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to reach out to you about anything, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I also co-direct our Center for Beverage Innovation. So we partner with individuals on recipe development or if you're looking for a training program and you're in kind of the Mid-South region, please reach out. We have a brewing certificate program that you could probably complete in a year. So those are kind of the main options in which we're working with people at this point.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for teaching us. This was amazing. Thank you so much for teaching us all about rice and sustainability and the future of it. It's really cool. I really appreciate you taking time out to talk with us today.
Thanks for having me. And anytime you want to talk about rice, it's funny, like I have a lot of projects with people, and then like the Vanilla Ice song, Rice Rice Baby, that like everybody wants to name their rice projects that. So, dun 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 dun.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Scott. Cheers.
Cheers. See y'all.
So, Don, what do you think about Japanese rice lager and rice now?
I cannot tell you how much I love that episode because our first guest totally took me by surprise with the whole fooder thing.
I know we should have just, yeah,
Could
we'll
have done
have
a
to have him
whole
back for a
episode on
fooder
that.
episode.
And then Scott, I guess I was just expecting to talk about, oh, jasmine rice has this flavor, and like I was not expecting to learn so much about the agronomics of it, and
Hmm.
and that there's all these, different varieties that might be better suited. Well, the gelatinization temperature is different, and I had vague awareness of this concept of gelatinization, but I love the way Scott broke it down, no pun intended, broke down
Hmm.
the concept. So now I actually know what it is, and that, a larger granule requires less energy to break up, and that's why you can have a gelatinization temperature for barley that's lower than. I just love this. How about you,
I know,
Em?
I know. Well, I love that you can use lipids to get the flavor that could
Yeah,
like add vanilla notes to stout, like using rice in a way adjacent to, I know this is an episode about Japanese rice lager, but
but
using using rice in a totally like I never even thought about that or
what
knew
if
that it existed.
like you buy hops now, and it gives you alpha acid content, and it gives you oil content. Like what if brewers started buying rice with like lipid numbers on it and stuff like
I
that, right?
mean,
Like,
maybe we're gonna get there.
yeah, this is so
It's just
cool.
the future of beer is very cool, everybody. Just saying. Anyway, visit allaboutbeer.com and please follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And again, allaboutbeer.com/support to please support this show and others. If you have questions for the experts, email podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting the show through advertising. Don, how can people reach out to you?
Oh, I am at the Dawn of Beer on X, Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram. On Facebook, I'm at the Beer Dawn. And as people may have noticed, I love to nerd out on stuff like this. So drop me an email. My email address, dawn@thedawnofbeer.com. And you, Em?
I am at Pints and Panels on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook, and my website is pintsandpanels.com. There is a reason that podcasts always ask listeners to subscribe and like the show. With more reviews and subscriptions, the algorithm shows our podcast higher on the list when people search for beer podcasts. So please rate and subscribe and help us spread the good word of good beer. Here's a final word from our sponsor.
This program is brought to you by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, where trailblazing runs in the family. From crafting a movement with their iconic pale ale to taking the IPA haze craze nationwide with Hazy Little Thing, it's an adventurous spirit you can taste in every sip. Find your next favorite beer wherever fine beverages are sold. With new brews for every season, there's always something to discover. Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, still family owned, operated, and argued over.
This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.